This video is brought to you by Ground News. Over the weekend, fighting broke out between Iranian and Taliban forces at a checkpoint on the Iran-Afghanistan border. The immediate cause of the violence is unclear, but it was almost definitely related to an ongoing dispute between Iran and the Taliban over the Helmand River, which runs from Afghanistan into Iran's rural southern provinces. The dispute has escalated in recent months, with Iran accusing the Taliban of siphoning off too much water upstream, and Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi explicitly warned the Taliban earlier this month that the Iranian regime would not allow Iran's right to water to be, quote, compromised. While the violence has since subsided, the two sides still don't see eye to eye on the Helmand River, and tensions look likely to get worse as climate change puts even more pressure on the water supplies in the region. So in this video, we're going to look at the recent spat on the Iran-Afghanistan border, the wider dispute over the Helmand River, and whether it could spark a full-fledged war between Iran and the Taliban. So let's start with what happened over the weekend. On Saturday, a shootout occurred between Iranian and Taliban forces at the Sassali checkpoint, which sits a few miles north of the Afghanistan city of Zaranj. No one knows precise figures, but at least 2 Iranian soldiers were killed, and both sides accused the other of shooting first. In response, the Iranian army deployed heavy weapons, including tanks and armoured vehicles, on the border, and closed the Zaranj-Delaram highway, which runs from Zaranj to the Iranian city of Zabul. The Zaranj-Delaram highway, also known as the Route 606, was built by India in 2009 and is one of Afghanistan's busiest roads, providing an important trade route for both Iran and Afghanistan. Anyway, the immediate trigger for the shootout is unclear. The Taliban and Iran don't get on generally, for 2 main reasons. First, the Taliban are mostly Sunni Pashtun, while Iran is majority Shiite, and the Taliban don't treat Shiite and other minorities particularly well. Second, Iran prefers politically stable neighbours, not least because there's already a latent separatist movement in the Iranian province of Balochistan, which is home to some 2 million ethnic Baluchs. This is why in the 90s, before the US intervened, Iran actively supported the Northern Alliance, an anti-Taliban resistance group that controlled parts of northern Afghanistan. Relations deteriorated sharply in 1998 after Taliban forces executed Iranian diplomats in the Iranian consulate in Marazi Sharif, and Iran even supported the US-backed Afghan government during the intervention, which is pretty amazing when you consider how much Iran hates the US. Unsurprisingly, relations have been tense since the Taliban took over, and this is the 3rd border skirmish between the two sides since the Taliban took over. However, the most recent point of tension, which probably contributed to the recent violence, is the Helmand River. Essentially, the Helmand River is a large river that runs down from the Hindu Kush mountains of Afghanistan into Iran's southeast, especially the province of Sistan and Baluchistan. The province depends on the Helmand not just for its sustenance, but also its economy, which is mainly agricultural. The first became an issue in the 50s, when Afghanistan, then one of the more prosperous countries in the region, started developing hydroelectric dams on the river. Iran got anxious that these dams would mean reduced flows into Sistan and Balochistan, and in March 1973, the two sides signed the Afghan-Iranian Helmand River Water Treaty, which basically guaranteed Iran roughly 10% of the Helmand's flow each year. This treaty has always been contentious, both because it's vaguely worded and because only a few months after it was signed, the Afghan monarchy was deposed via a military coup. It looked like things were going to get better in the 2010s when the US-backed government restarted negotiations, but the return of the Taliban has scuppered any chance of progress. Relations have become particularly tense in the last few years because Afghanistan has been renovating the Kajaki Dam, and in 2017 they restarted construction on the Kamal Khan Dam on the lower parts of the Helmand that was finished in 2021. Iran is anxious that these new dams will reduce the amount of water flowing into, and earlier this month, Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi told the Taliban that he wanted to send a team of Iranian hydrologists to monitor the new dam and warned the Taliban that Iran will not allow the rights of our people to be violated. The Taliban responded to Raisi's thinly veiled threat by mocking him online. And this seems to be one of the main causes of the recent uptick in tensions. Now, while the violence that we saw over the weekend has since subsided, it's hard to see this issue being resolved anytime soon. And if anything, it's only going to become more acute as climate change takes its toll on the region. This is because both countries have become increasingly reliant on the Helmand as other sources of water have disappeared, and the Helmand itself carries less water than before. Annual precipitation in the region is about 50% lower than it was 40 years ago, and the Helmand wetlands, which used to supply most of the region with water, have basically dried up. In 1975, the Helmand wetlands spanned a few thousand square kilometres, but a combination of mismanagement and a 30-year drought have sucked it completely dry. The disappearance of the wetlands has also exacerbated sandstorms in the region, because none of the sand is picked up by the water, which is why Zabul has the dirtiest air in the entire world, according to the WHO's 2016 data. This has left people in the region increasingly reliant on the Helmand as basically their only reliable source of water. But the Helmand's flow has also declined sharply in the last few decades, and is now about 10% of what it used to be. While Afghanistan has other sources of water available, Iran is now facing an acute water shortage. Thanks to climate change, rainfall has been declining and temperatures have been rising in the past few decades, and a third of Iran's population now suffers from water shortages. The problem has become particularly acute in the past few years, and in 2021, farmers in the Iranian province of Khuzestan took to the streets to protest the water shortage in the region, and government policies redirecting water from Iran's poorer southern provinces to its wealthier central ones. So you get the idea. While this weekend's violence has apparently subsided, climate change means that tensions are likely to escalate in the future, and further violence looks, if not likely, then at least possible. Ultimately, we'll have to wait and see what happens next in this story, but honestly, it seems like there's a breaking news story every hour. So how do I stay up to date? Well, I could just read one source, but then I run the risk of falling into an echo chamber and missing entire stories. Another answer is to download multiple news apps, but then you end up with 15 push notifications for the same story, and that's not something I'm down for. So instead, right on my phone's home screen, I have an app which collects all news sources in one place. Ground News is a website and app designed to help you break through media bias and fully understand the biggest news stories every day. Here's how it works. The first thing you'll see is the home feed. Here, you'll obviously find the biggest and most up-to-date news stories, but that's only the beginning. For example, here's a story about Ukraine's sanctions package against Iran. Right away, you can see the reporting bias. This story has a 17% left-leaning coverage and a 50% right-leaning coverage. You can also see how many total sources have reported on this story, as well as a brief glance of headlines from across the political spectrum. And if you click on the story, you can dig even deeper. Ground News offers a comprehensive breakdown for every story. You can read every headline, view the political bias and factuality score for every source, and you can even read the articles themselves right from the app. There's even a blind spot feature, which actively highlights stories people on your side of the aisle might be missing. And with their Chrome extension and personalized bias data, you can see exactly what you're missing. It's like a constantly updating Spotify Wrapped for news. Hopefully you can see that I like this, and honestly, I recommend it in real life all the time. Because of this, we've decided to offer a special 30% discount for Ground News' Vantage subscription. You can only access this discount by clicking on the link below. So check it out and help support an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.